Well, let's see. We are in recording. Oh boy. So, I watched a video on a couple videos, and it's from the enemy within, and it's the guy talking about again a whole bunch of tariffs that Trump is doing and then rescinding, and why they're bad. I don't need to go into that. If you're keeping up, then I'm sure you are more informed about that. So anyways, I just want to say something about, well, I just want to give a rant of myself. And since I currently only have 19 subscribers and none of them are going to watch this, it's more like one of those things that I'm just going to put on the permanent record for myself slash digital avatar, future me, that sort of thing. And have it on the, like I said, permanent record. So the tariff thing is, the argument was to try and balance trade deficits. The deficit of imports versus exports, and the argument, the better argument for trying to balance that is always, in my mind, well, let's try and then make things here that can only be made here. And one of the better things, I think, is something like housing. Now, they are trying to make housing like prefab housing. One of those things is like trailers for trailer parks, and there are more modern prefab housing, like modular housing that you can buy, maybe ship in on a freighter. It's kind of like shipping container style, and then you can kind of stack them and assemble them together in some way. I don't really know the tech, but I've seen some videos of them being firms, construction firms, and developers trying to create modular things like that you can assemble and either create multi-unit housing like that. But let's put that aside for the time being, because I'm going to address not that, and focus on more typical construction projects that are made domestically and constructed domestically by people here and machinery here. Hopefully even by machinery that is assembled, maybe even fabricated here, which It may not entirely be the case, but one can only hope. And as an example, I will just use a good fart. The case of the little town that I'm in now, Trinity. It's a small population. The census that I looked at last said it was 2,500, but whatever. You can just use any old small town that's diminishing in population, because all small towns are nowadays. But let's assume also that this small town, or any small town, your data point small town, wishes to halt the population decline and even attract more people, and become a something else, a not small town. I would suggest that they embark upon building a multi-unit, lower to mid-income housing unit, and not a single-family housing development, because that's what every developer is going for. A housing development, especially in Texas, I see those all popping up everywhere. That's what all housing developers are doing, and they're building 120, 300 single-family homes that are in the million to $1.5 million range for every house, and they're all planned communities, and they're doing all of those. I would say not the money, but the future is in building something like I'm just throwing numbers out there, so you're going to have to figure out the actual numbers. So 10-story unit with a 10-story building with 100 plus units in there, of mixed size for single units, between studio / economy to 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom, and again, all low to middle income, no high income. Maybe if you really want to get fancy, you can put a penthouse on the top floor for one single upper class person, and just to add a little diversity, because it would be nice to have a range of individuals in the neighborhood. So you could build that, and in a smaller town, when you're building that, you can employ the people in the small town to build that. And maybe if you would like, and you don't have the labor force in the small town, people from neighboring small towns to build it, to do the I call it grunt work, the non-skilled labor. And because it would just be logistically infeasible to import labor from overseas, and it would, to say the least, anger other people in the community, region, nation, you wouldn't want to do that. And it kind of violates the entire principle of the project to begin with. So you do that and you build 1 or 2 or 3 of the buildings. And then while you're doing that, you're employing the people of the small town. Because it brings jobs and everybody loves jobs. Not me, I don't give a crap about jobs, but I'm saying this is the proposal that you're doing. So you're doing that and it would take, I don't know how long, let's say it takes 2 years to complete the project. So while you're doing that, everybody gets a job, however many people it's going to take. I don't know how long it takes, but you're building those 1 or 2 buildings, and it's going to house, I don't know how many people. You want to make the structure and structures capable of housing, hopefully, let's say, 500 to 1,000 more people. And since now those people, hopefully in said small town, while it's being constructed, are getting better than minimum wage jobs. They have more money and it's generating income for the small town, and hopefully the small town itself is experiencing a resurgence, and there's more businesses and stuff in the small town, particularly the Trinity. I can tell there's empty storefronts that hopefully would reopen, so that when the buildings are done and could be filled up and could attract more residents, those storefronts that were empty could have a larger customer base. And maybe for example, in Trinity, the one grocery store that is here could now have, because there's 500 to 1,000 more people, there could be now another grocery store competing, and there could be then another department store, and you see how it kind of self-reinforces the growth of said small town. Again, it's just the example of Trinity here where I am, but by building something that is affordable for people to move into, and people of lower income that actually need the housing, and having those smaller businesses have had opening up, and the people that were building it had more money to go into the businesses. The buildings then attracted people, and now those people, even though they were lower income, and maybe even a good portion of the first residents were on, say, disability like myself, and they only had a little bit of disposable income. That little bit of disposable income was still thrown into the local economy. It still helps to cycle into that local economy, and it helps grow it a little bit more and a little bit more. And you can see how over time that would help. Maybe now that there's more people, maybe then some of the older buildings, older residences would be more attractive to other people, and they would be torn down and renovated, torn down and or renovated, and it would generate more income. And as long as it works, if it works once, others are going to replicate the example, obviously. So that's just one example. That's just one example of how, instead of imposing tariffs to try and bring back manufacturing, which is a horrible idea, manufacture shirts here to sell somewhere else, that's a horrible idea, because it's never going to work. You can't make a phone here to sell in Europe at 3 times the price that they're going to be able to make in Singapore or South Korea or whatever, when they can sell it in Europe or even over here for, again, a third or half the price. It's just not going to work. But if you build something here that, again, can't be built halfway around the world and then magically transported here, and you have to employ people here, and you have to pay them a certain rate, which is definitely not the minimum wage, because I don't know about this, but if you've ever done roofing or anything that's on par with the physical demand of roofing, you do not want to do that for minimum wage. I did it once, and it was just hauling the shingling, and it was blah. And I did it for 4 hours one day, and that was horrible. So, and they did not pay me minimum wage, and I did not want to do it again. So, yeah, you are not going to be able to pay people minimum wage to, wheelbarrow around cement and haul rebar and whatever the fuck is involved, and construction and stuff, and all of this stuff. And plus, when you're doing construction, hopefully you'll be able to get people to, sign on as, what is the apprentices and journeymen for plumbing and electricians and all that stuff. And then once the year or 2 years is over, they'll just have learned the trades, because they'll have been in the apprenticeship programs. And then there you go. I don't know. Apprentice carpentry, whatever. They'll have basic level trade skills too. So, masons also. So there you go. It's just one example. It's a very simple example, and from there you can expand outward to other examples, and like infrastructure and all sorts of other crap. If you want Americans to have jobs, find other things like that, instead of putting screws in iPhones, because robots will be able to do that very easily. And I'm not saying robots won't be able to build buildings, because they will, but whatever. that's a topic for another day, I suppose. Anyways, future me, you have a lovely day if you can even put 5 words together to form any kind of coherent sentence. I'm gonna go back because, man, I just finished a meal of red beans and rice with a little bit of sausage meat-like substance, and it was good. So, yeah, I'm waiting for it to turn into poop. All right, there you go. Oops.